Well, on behalf of this august body up here, I'm here to officially moderate this last session. I'm not going to have a lot of preamble. You know the drill. I'm just going to put this on either side. For those of you who don't know, my name is Stephen Call. I'm with the Federal Highway Administration. And rather than have me speak, they're going to have me moderate, which is probably a good thing. But I get to introduce this group up here that I enjoy working with day in, day out for the last 10 years. I'll just go down the line here. I have to see who's behind me, though. Sean Seeger is the Transportation Director of MAG. I have to take off my glasses. I get blurry that way, which is the MPO down in Utah County. And then we have Jeff Harris, who's the Director of Planning from UDOT. And we have Scott Hess, who's the Active Transportation Leader at Wasatch Front Regional Council, which is the MPO up in the Salt Lake area. And then we have Jeff Gilbert, who's the Director of the MPO up in Cache County in Logan. And finally, we have Muriel Zoshamil, who's the Communications Director at Wasatch Front. That's our lineup, all better speakers than me. But and Matt Sybil up here, who didn't warrant a seat. He'll be our first speaker. So we're going to make do with 5 seats behind me, and we're going to, when one stands, the other one will take their seat. It'll be like musical chairs. But maybe just to give a short federal perspective, and I'll keep it really short. I think that's important. I started in planning back with ICE-T, which was 1992, and in ICE-T they talked about the 3C planning process, which had to be a comprehensive, continuing, and cooperative process. And us feds had to make a call each year, a planning finding, that the 3C planning process was being followed amongst the state and the MPOs. In my mind, I thought that was kind of just a bunch of words, but I kind of see it as a spectrum of 5 C's when I've been in different states. If you can imagine over on the 0 end of the scale, I call it chaos, and we do have some states that are in chaos. I think in some states it's been kind of competitive, how we work between the MPOs and the state, and almost relishing when the other fails. Then we have a coordinated process where we let each other know what we're doing after we've done it. But then we have a cooperative process where we get together and we try not to get in each other's way. We try to work together and communicate. But at the end, we let each other review, and if they have comments, that's great. And then we have what I call collaborative process. If I could use that word, where we actually work together up front to help each other realize their goals. And if maybe the 6th C would be celestial, and we're not quite there yet, but it's my opinion, as I've seen the planning going on here in the state of Utah, I've been in 8 different states anyway, that we've pushed that needle. It was never at 0, never in chaos. It was a cooperative process when I got here, but it's become a much more collaborative process. And if you can accept my definitions, which were kind of simple, I think you'll see as they talk about how they've worked together to develop the Unified Transportation Plan, how that is the case. I know Andrew Gruber and others proclaim that we're unique in the country. I can tell you we are, how we do things here in Utah. I've given a number of presentations about how we develop plans and programs here, and I usually get, yeah, but we can't do that here because of this, and we are unique in how we do things here, and maybe the subtlety of it isn't appreciated by all, but I'd like to turn the time over to Matt Sybil from UTA to talk to us for a bit, and we'll kind of follow that. Well, the order will, I think, show. So we're going to hold the questions till the very end.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve. Matt Sybil with UTA. I'm going to talk with you a little bit about collaborative planning, give you an overview of the topic, and then turn it over to Sean Seeger. So most of you know the boundaries and just the lay of the land with our MPO partners. But this map shows that, and UDOT has an overarching role across the state where there aren't MPOs in terms of statewide transportation planning. And then us at UTA, we're nestled in the Wasatch Front Regional Council and MAG, but really north to south, we're one big transportation family. So I love talking about these statistics that our population is going to almost double in the year 2050. And I have to share a little story. So at the breakfast table the other day, we're sitting around eating, and there's an article in the Tribune about, it actually wasn't about UTA, believe it or not. It quoted some Envision Utah statistics that talked about this, what you see here, doubling a population. And my daughter, one of my daughters, she was kind of blown away by that. How could we double in population? You know, there's already a lot of people here. And so she was asking me a lot of questions about how that happens. And I said, well, you know, there's a lot of people that move here. But I said, you know, most of our growth is within this state. You know, we have big families, and you know, we're good at making babies. And she looks at me and she gives me a one-word response. She says, ew. And so, anyway, and some of you know that we just hit the 3 million mark. I believe we celebrated as a state on Monday down at a hospital in Lehigh with a birth down there. So when I moved here in 1994, and I believe that's the year we actually hit 2 million. So it's incredible to me, being here for just 21 years, we've added 1 million people just in that short 2 decades. So incredible growth, incredible challenges and opportunities. And speaking of that, you know, one of our greatest challenges and opportunities is related to air quality. And so we have a unique environment here and have challenges in the wintertime and in the summer with ozone. But I like to point out this sign. This picture has been shown at so many conferences that I've been at. And I think only in the state of Utah, where we have this level of collaboration, would you see a Department of Transportation up on their VMS sign say, for better air, use transit tomorrow. And so UDOT's been incredible in terms of messaging and collaborating with others as well. And this isn't the only sign that kind of rotates. It talks about carpooling or trip chaining, those kinds of things. So this messaging has really gone a long way. So in terms of collaboration, why should we collaborate? Well, really, you know, we shouldn't follow any jurisdictional boundaries, because our customers, the traveling public, they don't know those boundaries. Those boundaries don't exist to them. I wanted to share one other anecdote that kind of relates to this. I got to participate in a focus group that UDOT did just a couple of weeks ago, and it kind of got into some themes. It was related to the Wasatch Front Central Corridor project, and many of you have seen focus groups, and they're great, and there's often some initial questions that talk about, if I tell you a word, how does it make you feel? Or what's the first thing that comes to your mind? And I remember that one of the first questions was, when you hear the word UDOT, what comes to your mind? And so people just sort of, you know, it's a free flow conversation. And it's great, because what I was trying to illustrate here, you know, I heard things like, well, I think of a fast commute on I-15, and I love the speed limits have increased. Or, you know, somebody complained about congestion. But you'd hear things like, you know, the first thing that comes to their mind is, I think of the Frontrunner train up in Ogden. Or I think of tracks going to the University of Utah. Or there's a pothole in front of my house that just won't go away. And, you know, that's what I think of, you know, when I hear the word UDOT. And so, you know, really, if you look at we shouldn't have any jurisdictional boundaries when it comes to serving the customers, the traveling public. And so, you know, collaboration is not always easy, but another thing it does is that it allows us to communicate better with our stakeholders, including our elected officials. And I think there's one other element in terms of policymakers with House Bill 362, which passed this last year, that was a truly collaborative effort, not only in terms of the bill and what it has allowed the state to do, from gas tax to local option, but just the way that we worked together to communicate the benefits of that with policymakers. It was really, that whole process was framed in collaboration. And you know, I don't mean to say that it's always easy to collaborate either, because, you know, the crew behind me, we often have lots of arguments, and we differ in our opinions, but at the end of the day, we come together, and it's a healthy kind of tension, I think. And lastly, before I turn it over to Sean, you know, the collaborative effort that we've talked about, we've sort of collectively gotten noticed. And one of the most recent things here, the Federal Transit Administration and the Federal Highway Administration do every 4 years, they review our planning process. And I won't read this to you, but it basically says, you've done a great job, and nowhere else is there this level of collaboration compared to Utah. So it's been a great process, and we want to keep going with that. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Moneybags, Sean Seeger, to talk about financial analysis. All yours.
Thank you, Matt. You know, Matt was describing how well we all get along. 30 minutes ago, we were about ready to kill each other in one of our discussions on how to present in the new unified plan some of our financial analysis, meaning it was a spirited discussion.
We were only ready to kill Jeff.
Good point. So this partnering that we do is fun, but it's a spirited partnering, and it is challenging at times to accommodate the needs of our partners, and at the same time of getting what we need out of the process as well. More briefly, in this new unified plan, we just adopted our regional transportation plans and the statewide plan in June and July of this year. They'll be good for 4 years, and we're putting together the culmination of those, which is the new unified transportation plan. This last 4 years, we made a major effort on the financial analysis of the unified plan. In doing so, we work closely with the LTAP Center up at Utah State University. We work closely with the Utah League of Cities and Towns, and we also commissioned an independent study by the Utah Foundation to look at the condition of local roads and how local roads are being funded and how they're being taken care of. And so with that, I'm going to real briefly tell you how we worked through those difficulties. And one element to this entire thing that was very important is that we hired an independent financial analysis firm. We hired Lewis Young Roberts in Birmingham to come in and try to understand our financial situation. I'm a planner, Jeff is an engineer. We have expertise in roadway and transit and bicycle and pedestrian, but we don't have a lot of expertise in financial planning. So we figured, shouldn't we get some experts in this area involved, some bankers and some municipal finance people involved? There were situations where we were using net present value incorrectly in our own organization. There were situations where we were missing $1 billion of revenue, and we come to find these things out, and they are startling at first. And then you're grateful that you have found the problem, and you move forward. And so some of the things that we worked on together is, for example, on the cost side, consistent construction cost estimates and assumptions, a per mile cost or an interchange assumption. So the interchange that's estimated down in Utah County is going to be the same price as an interchange estimated in Davis County or St. George or Logan. All those numbers are going to be the same number, same cost basis for estimating those. So when I bring a legislator a project, that legislator knows that he can compare that project with another project in the state of Utah, and it has the same cost basis for doing so. On the revenue side, Mountain Land used to estimate that our revenue would grow at 3%. Meanwhile, UTA was estimating that it would grow at 5%. UDOT was estimating that it would grow somewhere in between there. So in that process, we were able to get all of our assumptions in line with each other and make sure that what I was assuming is the same that my partners were assuming. House Bill 362, this last legislative session, sponsored by Representative Johnny Anderson and Senator Al Jackson, was probably one of the biggest legislative efforts to fund transportation funding in probably 20 years. This piece of legislation that basically increased the gas tax on a percentage basis immediately at 5 cents per gallon. It increased it on January 1st. You heard Carlos talk about what that's going to do to the level 2 roads in UDOT's system. Those roads under 1,000 vehicles per day, we are now going to be able to take care of those roads, whereas we were not able to take care of level 2 roads before. But it basically reforms the gas tax. It looks at all modes, so it gives an opportunity for transit, local road maintenance, state road capacity, state road maintenance. It looks at each one of those categories and gives an opportunity to help the local communities address their own needs. And in fact, this measure is being voted on. It's called Prop 1 in 17 different counties, I believe, Muriel, is that right? 15? 17. 17 counties. This Tuesday, local voters will get to decide whether or not they want to increase a sales tax for their local road needs. So again, it's giving us the tools to do that good work. Jeff's going to talk about performance-based planning and the way that we're moving into looking at our system right now, as well as what we want to do in the future.
So in that meeting this morning that we had where we almost strangled each other, Muriel said, we don't have a lot of time. And so we need to just prosecute this meeting, just get through it. And so I leaned over to Ted, who's the Deputy Director for Wasatch Front Regional Council, and said, so Ted, what that means is you, I, and Andrew can't talk. Right? Isn't that right? Right? So performance-based planning, what a concept, right? Performance-based planning, performance management in the planning side of things. It's a great concept. Oh, Ted, you're there. I see you're there. Performance-based planning. We really haven't had performance management in the planning side. We've always kind of, I was talking with a very intelligent person several weeks ago, and she said to me, us planners, we sometimes do ourselves a disservice. We treat this planning process as kind of a standalone process. And we don't really begin the planning process with the end in mind. Actually, in our case, we deliver transportation infrastructure, right? And so the whole concept behind performance-based planning is that we begin with the end in mind, still Stephen Covey's phrase, that it is not a standalone process, that we start at the goals and objectives, right, of an organization or a group of organizations. And because those goals and objectives are absolutely crucial because they define how we assess need in the system and therefore the strategies that we use to address those needs. I'd also like to give props to our federal highway partners because they've, with MAP 21, produced a performance-based planning and programming handbook, actually, and a whole process. And I have to tell you, it's spot on in terms of the way it helps the planning process. Again, start with that end in mind. Think about those goals and objectives. Think about that next step in the process and what we're actually doing in this process. So props to our federal highway partners. So when we're talking about it in this context, we're talking about it in the context of the unified plan. Imagine that we come together and we start saying, this is collectively how we want our transportation system to function, right? Here are the goals and objectives of our transportation system. Not doing one-offs, right, and just saying, well, we're going to think about that road in isolation or that transit project in that isolation. How does the transportation system function as a whole? Then we can sit down and say, okay, what's the roadways role? What's the transit role? And then what are the facility roles in order to make that happen? So we met over the last year, and if you want to, attended some interesting meetings trying to get us to collectively, as UDOT, UTA, MPOs, and MPO partners, collectively agree on a set of goals. Wow, that was a fun process. It took us a long time to get through it. And yeah, there was almost some strangle moments in that meeting as well. So what we want to do now is what we did is we essentially came up with an initial set of goals that we're going to use, start collecting data on, start developing our plans based on that, and then we're going to continue to refine and adjust those as we move into the next planning cycle. So we're going to just quickly go through those. You can see safety. Obviously, everything we do is about safety. And you can see the objectives. So the key with performance-based planning and programming, right? Goal, objective, performance measure, trends and targets. And that's what we're trying to do in this process. And I will add, it's really not about being compliant with MAP 21, although we need to be compliant with MAP 21, or we won't get a nice letter from our federal highway partners and FTA partners next time. It really is about good planning. It is really good about good, it's about good business. So safety goals, you can see them there. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Economic vitality, obviously, state of good repair, or as we say, preserve what we have on the highway side. We like state of good repair, though. Air quality, mobility and accessibility goals. And I'm going to leave it there and turn it over to Mr. Hess. Do you want me to leave this up here?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, awesome.
Well, thank you. So active transportation, I think we'd all recognize that as a state, we've been working to improve our active transportation networks. And I want to just recognize all of our transportation entities on what they've been able to do in these accomplishments, and showing that it's really an improvement in a quality of life, and they're not going unrecognized. So 2015, the League of American Bicyclists ranked Utah as the 5th nationally as a bicycle-friendly state. And this is no small accomplishment. You can see steadily increasing from 2013, from 14th to 8th to 5th. This is an amazing accomplishment as a state, and it wouldn't have happened without everybody coming together. This is 5 categories: legislation and enforcement, policies and programs, education and encouragement, evaluation and planning, and of course, infrastructure and funding, which we're seeing more and more of across the state. Now, for the first time, the Unified Plan is going to show active transportation networks. This is huge to me. It includes all of the MPO's bicycle plans. This is going to be priority networks as a base, priority networks of existing and proposed routes, and their self-selected priorities. And the maps are going to be shown in the plan itself. So when you go out, you take this document, it's really elevating active transportation in the conversation. The website itself, you'll be able to click on individual projects, and it will give you phasing information, route information, really as much as we can gather from each individual MPO on what their active transportation networks represent. Good planning of these routes ultimately lead to completed projects that address the needs of all users. So we're beginning to see from our good planning at a local level up through counties, regions, state, UTA, that we're ultimately ending up with funded projects that are multimodal and representing the needs of all of our users. That's really all that I have on that. So I want to have Jeff from the Cache MPO talk to you about the Unified Plan website.
So we've always had a web presence for the Unified Plan, and it probably wasn't doing justice to the effort. We've had static kind of PDF files. Andrew Gruber has been kind of our website because he promotes it everywhere and has a tattoo on his chest about it. But we've recognized that there's really a need to go beyond that. So with the effort this time, we're in the works, and this is kind of a sneak peek. It's not yet up, but we have a Unified Plan website. It'll have that URL. And I think this will be kind of the go-to place, particularly for inside folks, agency folks, but also the general public. One-stop shop where all things transportation will be presented. I suspect that on the 11:45 p.m. on the last day of the legislative session, when legislators seem to make most of their decisions, or at least these significant decisions, that this website will be the go-to place. They're not going to carry a hard copy around. So this will probably become more and more important. It will have, and this was mentioned before, it'll have a database component where folks can go in and specifically query projects out, and it's fairly robust in its ability to kind of pull the stuff by MPO area, by county, by type, and so someone can quickly get to a project. That'll be an important component. But then probably the most significant will just be this interactive map. And the cool thing about this is it'll be updated. The Unified Plan is reflected of our individual regional plans, and that's a 4-year process, but sometimes they become static. Well, this amendments happen, different things happen, so this website will have the ability to embrace those different changes and present it to the public. So this website map, interactive, it's done quite well in terms of its user friendliness of interacting with it, and I think this will be probably the go-to place when people, both agencies, but also the public and legislators, elected officials, want to find out things about projects. So we're pretty excited about this. Hopefully, Muriel's doing a great job, Penna Powers, working on this, and it's not too far off where this will be debuted. And Muriel is going to wrap up the final comments.
Thanks. Muriel Sochimil with the Wasatch Front Regional Council. Matt, I'm guilty as charged. This time last year, I was 39 weeks pregnant with my third child, as you guys will recall. And I'm flashing back to that now because we were presenting on the Unified Plan. I'm so glad I'm not 9 months pregnant. So we are truly collaborative in the way that we work together as agencies. I know we've been talking about that, but that is, I think, the one key takeaway that we would love you all, when you walk out the door today, to remember is we are much more effective here in the state of Utah, much more efficient in what we do because we work together. Now, as the communications, the lone communications person in the sea of technical folks here, I tend to get a bit more optimistic. And so Sean reminded me this morning, Muriel, it's not all about the good stuff. You gotta tell them that it's really important to remember the challenges too. So I wanted to emphasize, we will see our population nearly double in the next 35 years. Again, because of people like me, so. But my kids are cute, you'll like them. So that is likely to happen. And whereas we are constrained by our natural geography, that geography that draws people to the state, that's so beautiful. I mean, we can go and, maybe 10 minutes up the canyon and we can go hike beautiful trails. It's great that we live here, but it also requires us to think smartly about how we grow, how we develop, and how we plan for the future of our communities. Air quality is also another challenge, but let me talk about the benefits. Air quality improvements. So as you all know, we have a winter inversion season, and we also have summer ozone troubles as well. A little under 50% of pollutants are from mobile source emissions. Well, that will change. Now, this is largely due to the fact that due to innovative technologies, our vehicles are getting cleaner. The fuels that we will be putting in those vehicles will get cleaner too. They're called, and I'm sure you know, Tier 3 fuels and vehicles. So as the fleet converts to these using these newer technologies with our vehicles, and as we start to use the more refined fuel, we will see lowered emissions. This is a new graph for us because it actually represents all of the counties in the state that are required to run what we call air quality conformity, to make sure that our transportation projects that we're planning for the long term, that we're staying within certain standards in terms of what the air quality looks like. So 67% reduction, that's huge. Oh, I went the wrong way. The Utah's Unified Transportation Plan isn't just about roads. It isn't just about transit. It isn't just about active transportation or biking and walking. It's all of those modes integrated together. How do we plan for the future in which we're providing choices for folks? I had just mentioned air quality. Transit is a huge way that we can improve our air quality, as Matt mentioned earlier. Using Trax, Front Runner, taking the bus, all those things can help to contribute to improved air quality. And so over the life of the plan, and a lot of the metrics that I'm going to show you here are for the life of the plan. Over the next 25 years, our plan, that we'll be coming out with in the next couple weeks is from 2015 to 2040. We will see a 60% increase in transit use per capita. So for all of you who watched those Man on the Street interviews yesterday, you'll recall when asked about what the future of transportation will look like here in our state, I mean, the huge majority of folks said, well, more public transportation. We'll be seeing more and more of that and more use as a result. This one's really significant, and we're still working on the graph. It's really hard to represent what exactly this measure, but this is vehicle hours traveled. So in 2040, the difference between doing nothing between now and 2040 and implementing the unified plan, you are looking at 3.62 days less driving in your car. I didn't explain that very well. This is my first time taking a stab at this measure. So essentially, in 2040, because we will have implemented the unified plan, fingers crossed, knock on wood, that will reduce the time we are driving around in our car by over 3.5 days each year per the average household, each year. That's not just delay, although that is a subset of this measure, but it's actually just how much time you're in your car. I live in Eagle Mountain, and I remind my planners all the time that I actually bought that house when I was working for UDOT Region 3, so I was just a 15-minute commute away. But now my commute is easily an hour each way. Yeah, a full-time working mom of 3 young children with a 2-hour round-trip commute every day. Yeah, it's tough sometimes. So this resonates with me, that if we're planning right and if we're implementing the plan, then we won't have to drive around for that amount of time. So it's fairly significant. Infrastructure savings. All of you are familiar with the deterioration curve of our pavement, right? I won't go into that because I know you guys are way above me in understanding this, but essentially the key takeaway here is that if we are planning for our infrastructure correctly, then we will be able to treat proactively our roads, and that has real savings. $1 invested today saves anywhere from $10 to $25 in full reconstruction in the future. Increased safety. I do want to point out that this is not a projection, obviously. This is looking retroactively at the past 14 years. We have seen an overall decrease in fatalities. The way that we plan for our system is that we want to increase safety over time with the projects that we build, how we design those, how we plan for the network to again, increase safety and reduce conflict points. So this is something that, as Jeff mentioned, we will be looking at as a performance measure because moving forward, we want to make sure that number trends downward. Economic vitality. This is also a pretty cool measure that we're still wrapping our heads around, but this essentially shows per MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization. We actually have a measure for UDOT as well, and it didn't make it into the final, but we'll add that. And then per road or transit, we see in nearly all measures an increase in job access. So in 2040, should we implement the Unified Transportation Plan, you will be able to access more jobs in virtually any part of the state via transit or by car. And that totals about 7,000 more jobs in an average 20-minute commute in your car or an average 40-minute commute via transit. So think about that, right? Like, who wouldn't want 7,000 more job opportunities in their backyard? It's pretty significant. Now, I do want to make the point, too, that this isn't just about implementing transportation projects. It's also about coordinating land use with transportation in a way that makes sense, so that those two need to work in tandem in terms of supporting the economy and creating these types of numbers. So that transitions to this next slide. For the 2011 to 2040 Unified Transportation Plan, the Salt Lake Chamber commissioned a study, an economic study, this was independent of our agencies, to look at, if we implemented the plan, and I want to wave it around, I want to pull a Andrew Gruber here. Oh, yeah, me too. Okay, but if we implemented the plan, what would it mean for our economy? Well, in addition to job access, we're looking at job generation. When businesses have that mobility, where they have access, where their workers can get to their places of work seamlessly and easily, where freight movement can happen seamless and easily throughout the state, you see this type of job creation. Now, it's important to note that only about 30% of this $183 billion in additional GDP is attributed to direct construction spending. So you may think, well, of course it generates, based on a multiplier effect or whatever, if there's a construction team out there and they buy a sandwich on the job, or, you're spending money with construction materials, that generates jobs and additional GDP. Well, it's not just that. That's actually only 30% of this overall number. The additional 70% is, again, when you have a transportation system working well, it just bodes well for the overall economy. And lastly, I'll leave with this slide. And know that those aren't my kids, but again, my kids are pretty cute. So, quality of life. Quality of life. The transportation system, when it's working well, you don't notice it. But you shouldn't notice it. Transportation is not an end of itself. It is a means to an end. So when we provide the supportive environment with a well-functioning transportation system, it builds a community. It helps to do that, and it improves overall quality of life. And that's it. So thank you, and then we're going to just do some Q&A.
We've coined a new phrase here. I'm going to do a Gruber. Do we have any questions? We're still about 20 minutes from lunchtime.
Sean, this was your presentation, but maybe anybody can answer. Are there new, either revenue assumptions, or like the whole new financial analysis, is the gap number different this time? Or just the whole result?
Hence the fighting this morning.
Good question, Carrie.
I should not have said that.
Now, this is a great question. You think about, I thought we had a slide on our financial assumptions, and I don't see it in there. I'm going to talk real generally, since we have sensitivity to the new number. What basically we're seeing is we had an 11.3 billion number in previous, billion, sorry, 11.3 billion, thank you, Carrie, need in our previous plan. Because of House Bill 362, that number has decreased by several billion because it has taken care of some of that need. Depending on what happens on Tuesday, whether or not counties vote for or against Prop 1, that may take an additional $2 billion out of that assumed new revenue and leave us around maybe a $9 billion number from an 11. So I'm talking in very general terms, but what you're seeing is our previous RTP had that 11.3 billion. Now with House Bill 362, that's decreased that assumed need significantly.
Wasn't there an assumption for 1% sales tax for transit, though? I mean, when we were working
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
that's still in there.
Yes, that's right. Even in the Utah County area, we assume a full cent would go to transit eventually throughout the life of the plan. We assume a full quarter cent is going to go to transit by the year 2020. So we have a lot of work to do still. And certainly Prop 1 will not take care of that need in Utah County area. So there's those financial assumptions I think that you're pointing out, Carrie, where we have additional revenue assumed, additional gas taxes assumed, additional local sales taxes assumed, additional vehicle registration fees. When we build this stuff, it costs money to not only build the capital, but to maintain and operate this complex infrastructure. Matt and I were joking each other, teasing each other that UTA hasn't really had to take care of many assets until we started to build these complex systems. And now we're starting to account for that and take care of the state of good repair component of it, and the costs are significant. So,
Any other questions? I actually get on conference calls with the other 17 western states where we talk about the revenue assumptions, and we definitely have the most positive, I'll say, assumptions in the western United States. But I think what was interesting to me is knowing how we're arriving at that here. Everyone's okay with that. But anyway. Any other questions? Well, I think they're tearing down all the booths, but I think our lunch starts at 11:30, so we're gonna have a little time to network before that time. Thank you very much for your attendance here.